There. Now you have a name. Hello, everyone. Meet Snidely. Snidely Jarlash. Yes, this is Snidely. He now has a name. Hello, everyone. I am back with the infamous Jar, who I am trying to figure out a name for because he's become quite the character in this story. Not always my favorite character because apparently my reading interests have changed a lot in the last few years. So, yeah, we'll see what this lovely Jar gives me this time, and maybe next time I see you, he will have a name. I'm thinking that I'm going to name him, make him a guy, just because he's a little bit troublesome, you know. And, well, we'll just go from there. So, let's see what I pick this time. So I'm looking for a fiction and a nonfiction again. So, stir it up really good. And what do I have? What is this one? This one is The Pool of St. Bannock by Philippa Carr. That is one of the ones from the basement at the other house. And that is Philippa Carr is another name for Victoria Holt, who wrote Gothic romance type books. So we'll see what that one is when I go find it. And let's see, I need a nonfiction. I had one and then I lost it. Nope, that won't be nonfiction. Gotta look for a blue one. Here's a blue one. Blue ones are nonfiction. So this one is Fit to Print, and that is another writing book. So I'm going to see what that one was, and I'll get back to you. Okay, I found it. Fit to Print. It's a book that I had from university, and I had just never gotten rid of. This is the Canadian Student's Guide to Essay Writing. Since I am no longer a student and no longer writing essays, I think I'm just going to go ahead and unhaul that one, and I'm going to pick a different nonfiction one. So, let's see what else the Jar has on the nonfiction front. Gotta find a blue one. There's a blue one. This blue one is Secrets of the Cat. So let's see if I can find that one. Okay, I found Secrets of the Cat. It's Lore, Legend, and Lives by Barbara Holland. And this looks like it is a look at the history, lore, intelligence, and relations with people and each other of cats. And this one is one that I would have bought a long time ago. It is from 1988, and it looks interesting. It's tells stories of cats, you know, in high places like Winston Churchill's cat and Teddy Roosevelt's cat, and talks about cat mythologies and just all kinds of general stories on the history and lore involving cats. And since, as you have all probably discovered by watching my videos, I enjoy mysteries and fantasies and that involve cats, this should be an interesting one for me. So I'm looking forward to reading that one. And when I go to my mom's house again, I will go find that Philippa Carr book, and I will tell you what it's about and give those ones a read and see if I enjoy them. Hello, everyone. So I just got back from my mom and dad's, and I found this book downstairs. This is The Pool of St. Bannock by Philippa Carr. And this is one of her historical fiction ones from her, what's it called, the Ladies of England or something series. I've never actually read one of her historical fiction ones before. I just have read like the Gothic romance ones. That's what I was into when I was a teenager. So this one takes place, it starts in Cornwall, and it's about Angelette, who's the daughter of Rolf and Honora. She's born at the Cador Mansion where she lives with her family. And then it says that there's something to do with a desperate and dangerous fugitive and a meeting that will shape her life. And then she goes to London and marries a guy who then takes her to the goldfields of Australia, where she runs across another person that she knows. And yeah, I'm not sure. I think this is Victorian age. So we'll see when I get a little more into it what it's like, and I'll see if I like it. Hello everyone. I'm going to give you a quick little update on my books for the Read It or Unhaul It. So I started on this one here, The Secrets of the Cat. It's Lore, Legend, and Lives by Barbara Holland. This was the nonfiction that I pulled this time. And I've gotten 30 pages in. And so far, the topic I'm finding interesting, but I'm not really enjoying the writing. What I'm finding is, as I'm reading it, there's sometimes when I have to read a paragraph 2 or 3 times to just kind of catch what she was trying to say. So I don't know if that's just me getting into her style yet, because I'm only 30 pages in, but we'll see, because that might affect my rating of it. It's like occasionally, it's like she has like sentences that aren't complete sentences, and it just, I don't know, there's just ways that it kind of, you kind of lose track of what she's talking about halfway through the sentence. So we'll see. So for the topic is interesting. What this one is telling about is, the history and legends and lore of the cat. And so far in the book, she's talked about a story of a cat that she knew that was a feral cat, and then kind of changed its mind on its own and decided to become a house cat. And so she was talking about then in the next chapter all about cat intelligence. And so that was what the next chapter was about. Now she's going to be getting on to talking about people with cats. So I'm really looking forward to when she gets into the later ones where she starts talking about cat lore, because I've been reading a lot of those, the Joe Grey cat mysteries, and that one I read last time, the Book of Night with Moon, which was about wizard cats and stuff. And all of those ones make reference to some of the mythology about cats based on Egyptian mythology and Welsh mythology. I'm looking forward to when she gets into the lore part. But so far, yeah, I'm finding that the reading the writing itself, I'm not overly fond of. Although I did like this here, where she was talking about different vocalizations that cats make. And I just like this description. The new little black cat never opens her mouth to say anything, but speaks in her throat to herself, trotting up and down stairs and in and out of closets, chirping and murmuring and exclaiming in a kind of watered silk pattern of sound that can make the possessor of mere English feel as mute and flightless as a turnip. This is interior monologue, though, intended to communicate with no one but herself. For speech she has a long, wavery, pointed tail of such expressive grace that it must be a perfect poem for those with the sense to understand its voice. So that was one part that I did like her writing, and it was just kind of a fun description of how that cat talks. So anyways, I will keep reading that one. And then I am now 54 pages into, this one is The Pool of St. Brannock. I've never actually read one of her books under the name Philippa Carr before. I've always read her Victoria Holt ones, which are more of a gothic mystery thing. And so I'm not sure yet how I'm feeling about this one. I am only 50 pages in, so I'm going to keep going. But so far, I'm not finding the character very interesting, and not much has happened in the first 50 pages. We finally got to where something was actually kind of happening. But I also keep kind of losing track of how old the girl is, because she's thinking back on this time at where I'm at. And in it, she was like about 10 years old. A lot of the time she feels more like 15 or 16 in the way she's talking. And I know back then, this is Victorian age, I know people grew up faster, but I'm having a little trouble keeping track of how old she is because it reads older. Then there was one of the classic things done in older literature that I'm not overly fond of, and that is she falls in some water, and it's not even cold out. She falls in some water. She ends up back at the manor house and comes down with bronchitis and pneumonia and almost dies. That is such a trope in a lot of those older books. She was she was in some shock at the time too, because of something that had happened. I'm reading it, and all of a sudden it's like, all of a sudden she's got bronchitis and pneumonia and almost dying. And I'm like, okay, but that's a virus and she just fell in the water. Like, so it's one of those common tropes in old books though that I find, and it just it's one of those ones that kind of makes me laugh, but also, kind of takes me out of the story, because it's like, okay, how did she catch pneumonia from what happened? So anyways, that was just one little quibble, but I'm finding it okay. I'm not finding the writing really great yet. It's kind of piecemeal, and I don't know. I'm just not into it yet. So we'll see how it goes. If I get any further, if I get more interested in it as I go further, we'll see. And I will let you know whether I decide that I want to keep that one or not. And then the other thing that I'm reading right now, the cat just jumped up and made my phone shake. The other thing that I'm reading right now is actually I'm listening to the audiobook of The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. I have read The Fellowship before, but I haven't read the other two yet. But I did get a hold of, from Libby, I got a hold of the audiobook narrated by Andy Serkis, who played Gollum in the movies. And he is such a good narrator. It is so awesome. So I'm actually reading along in the book as I listen to the audiobook as well. And so I'm doing that right now because I finally got the audiobook, and it's like a month long, like several months long wait. Thank you, Raven, for shaking the camera. It's a several months long wait to get that audiobook because it's so popular. So I'm making sure that I read that one now, and then hopefully the second one for The Two Towers will come in sometime in the next few months. I think I'm still pretty far down on the list for that one. So anyways, that's the other one I'm reading. I'm enjoying it so far. I am not too far in. I'm just page 32. So it's just after Bilbo's party, and he's decided to leave and used the ring to sneak out of there. So I'm just at that part right now, and looking forward to listening to more of it. I love the way Andy Serkis does all the voices in the audio narration. So that's going really good. It's really fun. So that's the other one that I'm reading right now, and I will check in with you guys once I've read a bit more. Time for a little update. So I've been reading this one here, The Pool of St. Brannock by Philip Carr, and I did get to page 82 last night, and I'm actually going to DNF this one. Apparently the sun's going behind a cloud. I am just not finding it interesting. Even when key events have been happening, I've been finding it kind of boring. I don't know. I'm just not feeling it. So I guess I'm kind of disappointed because I was looking forward to this one because I had thought that I would like her writing, since I used to like her as Victoria Holt in her Victorian Gothic romances and stuff. But that was back in high school too, so I'm not sure how I would feel about those ones now. But this was the first one of hers as Philippa Carr that I'd ever tried, and I just wasn't enjoying it. So I am going to pick another book from the jar because I'm still only, I'm only about, I would say 30 pages into the nonfiction book, which is the one about the cats. The other things that I've been reading lately, I'm 66% into the audiobook of The Fellowship of the Ring, and I am going to actually finish the rest of it reading the physical book, because I had to send it back to the library, unfortunately, and the wait on that one is like 4 months or 5 months or something like that. So I am going to finish reading the physical book because I do have the audiobook of the second one on of The Two Towers on reserve at the library as well, and so I want to be ready to read that one when it comes, because what I'm doing is I'm reading the audiobooks read by Andy Serkis, who played Gollum in the movies, and he is so good. I highly, highly recommend listening to those audiobooks. He has just a wonderful voice for it, and he does the voices of the characters so that they almost sound quite a bit like the characters did in the movie. And of course, I'm absolutely addicted to those movies. I have been ever since they first came out. He does a really, really good job with reading the story. So, but yeah, I made it to, I got to 66% just through the Council of Elrond, which was the part that always kind of stopped me when I was reading the book in the past because it was just so long. So, but listening to the audiobook of it was very easy to do. So I got that done, and so I'm going to keep reading the physical book. And then I'm about 40% into the audiobook of How to Clean House While Drowning. Is it How to Keep House While Drowning? Anyways, by Casey. I'll put it up on the screen because I can't remember her name. That one I'm finding very interesting so far. It's a nonfiction book about how to look after things and look after yourself and your home when you are neurodivergent or have depression and are dealing with a lot of things like that. And I'm finding it very useful so far. I'd actually like to get the physical book of that one so that I can go through it and underline some things, because I definitely am finding it, like, I think it's going to be very helpful. So that's those ones that I'm also reading at the same time as this. So I'm going to grab my jar here, and we're going to pick another nonfiction or another fiction, because I want to read more than just 88 pages of a book for this vlog. So, so let's see what we get. Oh, I got two here. There we go. This one is Hope's War by Marcia Scripich. Okay, this one is a children's book. I will grab it and I will tell you about it. Okay, I found it. This is Hope's War by Marcia Scripich, and it's personally signed. I'm excited about that. So I'll tell you about the book first. The story is about a girl named Katerina Baliuk, and she's a fine arts student, and it takes place in Canada. It says that she's hoping for a peaceful grade 10, but then her grandfather, Danilo Feschuk, is accused by the RCMP of being a policeman for the Nazis during World War II in Ukraine, and suspected of having participated in atrocities against civilians. When the story is exposed in the local newspaper, Kat and her family become the center of a media storm. Her grades in school and her relationships with friends suffer. Her only support comes from her family and Ian, a classmate with whom she discovers she has more in common than just artistic promise. So that looks really good. I had gotten this book back, now that would have been, see, I think it was pretty new back then. So let me just see when this one was published. 2001. That sounds about right for, well, no, it would have been probably, see, I was already living in at the time that I went to that conference. So I want to say it was probably 2003 or 4 that I went to the conference. So I went to the CanScape conference, which is the Canadian Society of Children's Authors, Illustrators, and Publishers, I believe. Anyways, they had it up near where a couple hours from me that year, and I went to the conference and I got to actually meet Marcia, and she was one of the presenters there, and then that's where I got this book. But the funny story that I have about that is I hadn't published anything yet, and I was just working on you know, my books, and it was my first time ever going to a conference like that by myself. And I remember the first night we all got there and they sat us down. We all had these icebreakers that we played, and I was sitting with this one lady at my table, and we're chatting away and just having a great old time, and we're talking about all kinds of things, joking and laughing, and like I can't remember what the icebreaker was, but I remember it had something to do with making some song up about underwear. And anyways, it was one of those funny icebreakers. And so then the next morning I get up and I go in for breakfast, and I see her sitting at the table, and so the lady that I'd been chatting with, and so I go and I sit with her, and we're talking away, and I just kind of asked her, so what do you write, and she's like, oh, well, I'm just publishing, I think she said her 52nd book or something like that. And I was just like, okay, you're one of the presenters. I had no idea. But the funny story about that is that she was so friendly, and I remember that was what made it finally click in my head that published authors were just regular people like me, and we could sit around and joke the one night about make jokes and make up a song about underwear, and then the next day she could be presenting at the conference, and I just remember that in my mind that was the moment when I realized that published authors were just real people and not some level so high above me that I could never reach it, which was really encouraging to me as a young author wanting to be published. So, and since then I've published 4 books. So, but it just I will never forget that story about and the next morning when I was sitting beside her and heard that she was publishing her 52nd book, and I was sitting beside her, this little nobody from small town who had never been published before, and here she was being the most friendly person in the world to me, and I will never forget that. So anyways, I am looking forward to reading this book. I had bought it at the time, and then I never did read it because I wasn't into reading young adult at the time. I had just kind of bought it because it sounded interesting and I wanted to get her signature. So I will give that a read, and I will let you guys know what I think of it. There. Now you have a name. Hello, everyone. Meet Snidely. Snidely Jarlash. Yes, this is Snidely. He now has a name. I did this because my jar of books is evil. It has been giving me lots of DNFs and low star rating books. Now, I know what you're thinking. But Rhonda, these are books off your shelf. Doesn't that mean that you had crappy taste in books before? And you may be right. A lot of these books are ones that I bought thinking I would like them, but never did read them. And now I'm discovering why. So anyways, this is now Snidely. There you go. Snidely the book jar. And to honor Snidely, let's put him there. To honor Snidely, I am officially DNFing this book. So this was Secrets of the Cat. It's Lore, Legend, and Lives by Barbara Holland. And this one was one that I was so sure I was going to enjoy because I love cats, I love cat books, I love cat lore and history. However, the main problem that I have with this book, I got 70 pages into it, 4 chapters. The main problem that I've been having with this book is I really don't like the lady's writing style. She comes across as really, it comes across to me as really snarky, but it's kind of has the tone of like it's meant to be humorous, but it just comes across to me more as snarky. And I just am finding that I find her sentences hard to follow sometimes. And then, like I was hoping for more of the lore and legends of cats and being, you know, more of the history and everything. And I noticed there is like a couple chapters of, there's the early years of cats and cats in the church as another one. And those sorts of things in there, but I haven't been able to get to them because her writing style is just not working for me at all. And I'm finding it just a slug to read through. So I decided to DNF it. And I'm sure I have lots of other good books on cat legends and lore. But if you happen to know of any good ones that go into especially the history and the legends about cats and some of the mythology about cats, I would love to know what books those are, because I would like to make sure I have a good cat lore book, because I, like I say, I just absolutely couldn't get into this one. It just, yeah. And like the other problem was she was so negative so much of the time. Like she's telling these stories about cats and like her section on cats with people. And so she's telling these stories, some fun stories and everything about these cats and what they would do. But then she ends it off by telling this story about this lady who had a cat, but she was all lonely because she wouldn't treat the cat like a human. Okay, that was, I didn't mean treat the cat like a human, but she wouldn't treat the cat like it was a friend and a pet. And so she was so miserable, and this poor cat was so miserable that the cat actually made friends with the mice that it was supposed to catch, you know. But I mean, it's such a depressing story, and I don't know. I just really wasn't enjoying it. So I am going to DNF that one. I haven't started the young adult one that I picked last time yet. I'm going to do that here soon, and I'll let you know what I think of that one. But I'm not going to pick another nonfiction from the jar because I am right in the middle of 2 other books that will take up the rest of my time for this vlog. So I'll tell you about them. I'm reading Cursed Bunny. This one is a book of short stories by Bora Chung. It's translated from Korean. And I've read the first 3 stories so far, and they're very interesting. It blurs the lines between magical realism, horror, and science fiction. And, a lot of it is using that to address the horrors and cruelties of the patriarchy and capitalism in modern society. So far, the 3 stories that I read were very interesting. The first 2 were really strange, very strange. The first one I think is probably the weirdest short story I have ever read in my life, but after reading it, I couldn't get it out of my head, and I kept thinking about potential meanings behind it, so that says something. So that first story, again, with this one I'm going to do what I did with other ones, where I'm going to rate each story between 0 and 5, and I'll use that to determine my rating for the book. But yeah, that first story, I would probably give that one a 4, and the second story I would also give a 4. The second story had to do with a woman who becomes pregnant, and society is telling her, she becomes pregnant by a fluke without having had sex or anything. And so but society is telling her that her baby won't be born properly if she doesn't find a father for the baby and all this. And so it has to do with that whole attitude of the patriarchy and everything. And I just found it really interesting, even though it was quite horrific. And then the third story I absolutely loved. I gave it 5 stars, and that is the one called Cursed Bunny that this one is based off of, or that the book is titled off of. And that's the story of this cursed lamp that's shaped like a bunny, and it ends up being given to this guy, and then it deals with the fallout and the aftermath of that. But it definitely has a lot to say about capitalism and society, and but I just found it super interesting because it reminded me of those old stories that I would have read like a long time ago, like things that I would read in university. And that, like, I remember there was that one, The Monkey's Paw, about where they get this you get 3 wishes, and then there's a dark twist to it. And I found that this story kind of reminded me a little bit of that, but I also found it quite humorous because of the bunnies involved in the curse. It was just, I could tell that the author knows something about rabbits. So anyways, but it was very interesting. I really enjoyed that story. So that one I gave a 5 to, and I still have most of the book left to go. So yeah, I'm on the 4th story, which starts on page 73. So reading that one. And then the nonfiction that I'm currently reading is A History of the World in 12 Shipwrecks by David Gibbons. And this one actually just came out this is a fairly new one. Came out in 2024. David Gibbons is an underwater archaeologist, and he has dived on many shipwrecks all over the world. And so he takes you through these 12 different shipwrecks, going through periods of history and explaining things that they found on them, and how you can use the shipwrecks from that time period to tell more about the history and shipping and all those kinds of interesting things. So the first one was a Bronze Age shipwreck. The second one was in the 14th century BC, Tutankhamun, around that time. And the third one was the Golden Age of classical Greece in the 5th century BC. Fourth one was the height of the Roman Empire in the 2nd century AD. And then the chapter that I'm on right now is the 5th one, which has to do with Christianity and early Byzantium in the 6th century AD. The next one is Tang China. Then there's Viking voyages. There's the flagship of Henry VIII, the Dutch Golden Age, the Royal Anne Galley, gold piracy and African slave trade in 1721, then the HMS Terror in 1848, and SS Gersopa in 1941 during the Battle of the Atlantic. So far I'm finding it very interesting. There are definitely parts of it that are a little bit over my head. He gets into a lot of technical stuff about the archaeology, but I've always found that stuff interesting as well. The only thing that I wish with this one, like, he's got lots of cool illustrations and pictures from the various things that he's done and to go with the various chapters. But what I really would have liked is if there were also some sketches and diagrams of some of the things in the actual chapters, because I find myself reading something and thinking, well, I wonder how that actually looked, and it would be really useful to have a diagram of it. But so far, I am really enjoying this one as well. It's keeping me going. So that's the 2 books that I'm going to be reading, and then I'll also be starting that young adult book, the one by Marcia Skrzypacz. So we will see how that goes, and yeah, good old Snidely here has lots more books for me to pull out. Time for an update. So I started Hope's War by Marcia Skrzypacz, and I have actually gotten to chapter 12, which is 64 pages in, and I'm enjoying it so far. It is a young adult novel about a high school student, and I'm not real big on young adult novels myself, but I am definitely enjoying this one. It's about a young Ukrainian girl living in Canada. Her name is Katerina, and she lives with her parents, her sister, and her grandfather. Her grandmother recently passed away. And she's just started at a new school. She's a fine arts student. And then she came home the one day to find the RCMP talking to her grandfather, and she discovers through some things that, through seeing some papers and that sort of thing, that he is being accused of having participated in Nazi war crimes during the war. But there's definitely more to it than that. And one thing I'm finding really interesting is the whole idea of, that we so easily make judgments on people without understanding what they had to actually face at the time. And I know that's one of the things that she writes about, is how the resistance over there had to fight. And I thought it was interesting, the one thing that she had the grandfather thinking about, and he was talking about how there was no right or wrong side there. They had the Russians on one side, they had the Germans on the other. They were caught in the middle. And so I'm really curious to find out more about what's happened in the past for him. So I am going to keep reading that one, and I finally found one out of the jar, Mr. Snidely jar, that that I'm enjoying. So I am really looking forward to continuing on with this one. I've made a bit more progress with Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. I have now read, let's see, 6 of the stories. I've now read 6 of the stories, and I gave pretty much all of them 4 stars, other than the 4th one I gave 4.5, and the 5th one I gave 5. So what was that one? Let me see. So yeah, the 4th one was The Frozen Finger, and that one was a really weird, another really weird story, kind of a bit of a horror, but I just found it very compelling. She's definitely a really good writer. And then the 5th one was Snare. Yeah, fifth one was Snare. I gave that 4 stars. And then the Goodbye My Love one, which was a sci-fi one, I gave 5 stars to. I thought it just had some really interesting concepts, and just it had to do with androids, intelligence, and humans versus androids, you know, kind of in a not in a battle sort of way, but just in a really interesting, you know, comparison sort of way. And I just found it to be, again, a really compelling story, and had some good, thoughtful messages in it that made me think. And that's the one thing that I'm finding with her stories, even the ones that I'm a little less inclined to like, I'm finding them very thought-provoking. Like the first 2, I gave them 4 stars because they were very thought-provoking, even though they weren't like my favorite stories to read, and not something I really want to reread again. I will probably reread the Cursed Bunny one a few times, because that one I really did enjoy. So yeah, I'm about halfway through this one, and I have also made some more progress on the nonfiction one about the shipwrecks, and so I'm getting close to about halfway on that one as well. So I will let you know how the rest of the reading goes on these ones. Hey everybody, it's time for another update. So I finished reading this one. This is Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars based on my average of all the stories. And none of the stories in here got under 3.5 stars. I think it might not even got under 4 stars. But I really, really enjoyed it. Her writing is so good. And being that it's a translated book, I was quite surprised that the translation was so good, because it really captured, I think, the author's voice. So that was cool. So there was a couple of stories that I gave 5 stars to. I really liked the Cursed Bunny story. That one is about a family that makes cursed objects, and they make this bunny lamp that's cursed. And I just really enjoyed that story because of the way the curse worked and everything. It was right up my alley. And then the other one that I loved was called Scars, and it was quite a long one in here. And that one was kind of a twist on a fairy tale. It was about a boy who gets captured and then sacrificed to this monster in the mountain, and kind of his story of how he tries to survive and overcome. And it was just a really good story as well. The stories are definitely horror in this one, which, like I say, I haven't read a lot of horror, but they definitely would probably be classed as that, or, you know, horror and twisted fairy tales. But I found that even in the ones that I thought were a little too weird for my liking, the writing was so good that I couldn't give them any kind of a low rating. They were just so good. And there was like a lot of underlying themes and ideas that a person should think about. And so I'm actually wanting to buy this one so that I can go through and really underline some of the quotes that were super interesting to me. So that was that one update. And then on this one, this is Hope's War by Marcia Skrypuch. I am on chapter 19 now, which is page 108. And I'm really enjoying this one so far. The characters are really good in this one. I really, really like the teenager, and I really like her grandfather. We're just starting to get some flashbacks of his from the time of the war. And so it's kind of heart-wrenching, the things that they went through, being part of the resistance and everything. I'm really enjoying that one, and I'm almost halfway through it. So I'll be finishing that one pretty soon. And then the other one that I was going to finish off for this vlog was A History of the World in 12 Shipwrecks by David Gibbons. And I am now at, where am I here? Chapter 8, which is page 143. I just finished the chapter on the Viking ships. And so that was really cool for me because, of course, as you guys know, that's one of my all-time favorite time periods to read about. He talked about some Viking shipwrecks and about the Viking expansion and how they were the first people to come to North America long before Columbus, and some of the archaeology that was done at L'Anse des Meadows, which is where they landed in Newfoundland. It was a really super intriguing chapter. And so now I'm on to the next one, is going to be the Mary Rose in 1545, the flagship of Henry VIII. I really would have appreciated if in each chapter he had had some maps showing where the wrecks were found and the path that trade had taken, and all those sorts of interesting details. I really would have liked maps, and I would have loved to have some diagrams of the things that they found and what the ships would have looked like, especially, you know, some of the older, like Bronze Age, and, you know, the early Greek and those types of ships. I really would have loved to have some diagrams as well. That would have really rounded it out for me. So that's probably going to keep it from getting a 5-star from me, but I do find it very readable, other than some of it is a little over my head because it's pretty heavy archaeology, but yeah, it's well written and I'm definitely enjoying it. I just really wish he had those maps and diagrams. It's finally time to finish this vlog and give you an update. So I finished reading Hope's War by Marcia Skrzypacz, and this was a really good one. I gave it 4.5 stars. I don't read a lot of young adult, but I did really enjoy this one. Her writing style was really good. The characters were really good. I really enjoyed the characters. The whole story was very compelling. It was an aspect that I hadn't really thought of before. What happened with people fighting in the war in areas that were occupied. And it was based on actual Canadian history, because at the end of the book, she talks about, in her afterward author's note, she talked about that this was published in 2001, and as of April 2001, there were 3 Canadians that were set to be deported and stripped of their citizenship because of a case similar to the one that she writes about here. And so I had actually looked it up because I was curious. If anything had happened, because I mean, this was written in 2001, and it looks like one of them, it looks like they've all passed away now, and none of them were actually deported. One of them, I believe, I can't remember now, but yeah, none of them were actually deported, and they've passed away now. But the cases were still in the courts, you know, for pretty much this whole time. And from what I read, it sounds like there wasn't a lot of evidence, or none at all, that they had actually done anything. And so it was just a very interesting story, and something unique that I hadn't read about before. And I definitely recommend that. And if you've got young adults in your family, her books are very readable and very good. So I liked that. And then I finished A History of the World in 12 Shipwrecks by David Gibbons. And this one I gave 4 stars to. Like I had mentioned before, it was very good. There were some parts of it that were a little over my head, readability wise. But I would have definitely rated it higher if it had more not pictures so much, even because there was pictures in it, but more diagrams and especially maps. I would have loved to have maps in this book, because there was a lot of times when I was reading it and he was talking about places and that, and I just couldn't visualize where they were. There was a few times that I, specifically looked up maps on my own, but especially with some of the ancient world, a lot of those place names have changed now. But it definitely kept my interest, and it was a very intriguing book. Historical, another, interesting history. So that is the books that I read for this vlog. So at least at the end, Snidely the Jar gave me one book that I enjoyed. And then you did enjoy a couple of the other ones that I was reading that I took out from the library. So I'm going to see what the jar gives me next, whether I end up reading it or unhauling it. But I will give whatever it is a shot. I will see you guys soon. Bye.